On 5 News, the battle over Brexit.
The government cannot trigger Article 50 without an Act of Parliament authorising it to do so.
The country's top judges rule MPs and Lords must have a vote before we begin leaving the EU. The woman who started the case calls it a victory for democracy.
Only Parliament can grant rights to the British people, and only Parliament can take them away.
So, what happens now? Also, the couple shot by the Tunisian gunman while celebrating their wedding anniversary. He was killed. She pretended to be dead in a desperate bid to survive. Almost 200 attacks on NHS staff every day. Nursing leaders want more protection.
I was going home to my 2 children and trying to cover bruises on my neck, and because I don't want them to be worried about me going to work.
City of stars, are you shining just for me?
And it's La La Land shining at the Oscar nominations with a record 14 nods. But there's hope for the Brits too. Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Sian Williams. MPs and Lords must have the final say before we start to leave the European Union. After 6 weeks of deliberations, the Supreme Court ruled that Theresa May alone does not have the power to trigger Article 50. It'll be down to Parliament. Campaigners call that a victory for democracy, but the government is also being bullish, insisting it won't delay or disrupt plans to start leaving the EU by the end of March. Our political editor, Andy Bell, reports.
All rise.
The government had argued it had the power to begin the Brexit process alone. Today, the highest court in the land told them no.
Today, by a majority of 8 to 3, the Supreme Court rules that the government cannot trigger Article 50 without an Act of Parliament authorising it to do so.
For those who brought the case, a sweet victory.
Only Parliament can grant rights to the British people, and only Parliament can take them away. No Prime Minister, no government can expect to be unanswerable or unchallenged. Parliament alone is sovereign.
Outside the court, protesters, some happy, some not.
Parliament had a vote as well, so they're now getting 2 votes while we only got 1. They voted to either stay in or come out. Now they're going to go and say what they want to say when they all club together.
The case here at the Supreme Court was never about whether Britain should leave the EU or not. That has been decided by the referendum. But what the judges said was that because Brexit will change certain laws and legal rights, the people in Parliament will have to approve the process.
The government's response, there'll be a straightforward bill within days to allow the triggering of Article 50. But there's a warning too.
Parliament will rightly scrutinise and debate this legislation, but I trust no one will seek to make it a vehicle for attempts to thwart the will of the people or frustrate or delay the process of exit the European Union.
The Labour leadership says it won't block Article 50, but it will try and amend the bill to influence the terms of Brexit.
We're going to hold them to account. We're going to hold them to account to protect jobs. We're going to hold them to account to make sure British industry does have market access, and we're not going to allow ourselves to become some kind of offshore tax haven. That's not what people voted for.
Many Labour MPs, though, are getting ready to defy their leader and vote against starting the whole Brexit process.
As far as I'm concerned, 75% of my constituents voted to remain, and I am here to represent their views.
Do you see why people would say, well, this is exactly what we would expect, the establishment in the form of MPs trying to frustrate the will of the people?
Well, the will of my people, my constituents, was that they wanted to remain.
There was one win for the government today. Devolved governments such as Scotland don't have to be consulted. This ruling, says the Scottish First Minister, has brought another independence referendum closer.
Be in no doubt. I think the decision is looming for Scotland. Are we prepared to allow our future to be dictated by a Westminster government that's going down a path that I think the majority of people in Scotland do not want to go down, or are we going to take our future into our own hands?
In this square mile of central London today, the court has had its say. Now it's over to Parliament.
Well, let's go to Westminster now and talk to Andy. Let's talk through this timetable, Andy, because the government insists it can trigger Article 50 by the end of March. Is that realistic?
I think it is potentially realistic. I mean, ministers are feeling pretty bullish this evening. I think that's largely because Labour leadership are saying they're not going to try and block Article 50. They are going to respect that timetable of getting it, Article 50 triggered by the end of March. But having said that, don't assume it's all going to be plain sailing, because, as we heard, Labour, the SNP, others are all going to try and amend the legislation as it goes through. And that's going to get pretty tricky. Now, on the face of it, the government should have the numbers to defeat any amendments. We're expecting very few rebels from the Conservative side, for instance, to peel off, and so therefore they may well be able to see off all those amendments. But all the same, what it means is there is the real potential there for Theresa May to lose control of this process, and that is clearly what she has sought to keep the whole way through. That is why she fought this legal case right to the end, and that still remains a potential danger for her. And we know that she really wants to keep control of how Britain leaves the EU.
All right, Andy. Thanks for now. If you have any more questions about what today's ruling means for you, then Andy's going to be doing a special live Q&A session on our Facebook page at 6 o'clock, and you can find that by searching for Channel 5 News. A woman whose husband was killed in the Tunisia terror attack in 2015 says she played dead next to his body in order to survive. Alison and Philip Heathcote had been on holiday in Sousse to celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary when a gunman opened fire on a beach. An inquest into the 30 British tourists who died is hearing evidence about each victim, as our chief correspondent Tessa Chapman reports.
In an instant, a terrorist tore this happy couple apart. One moment, Alison and Philip Heathcote were relaxing on sunbeds. The next, Safadine Rezgoui strolled onto the beach in Tunisia and opened fire with a machine gun. Today, the inquest for the 30 British victims heard this statement from Alison, describing the moment she and Philip were shot. "I was fearing for my life. I started laying on the sand, trying not to move and draw attention to the fact that I was still alive. I decided my best chance of survival was to act dead. At the first opportunity, I was asking Philip if he was all right. There was no response, and I realised he had not made it." Lying on sunbeds nearby were the Fishers from Leicestershire, who'd been happily married for almost 50 years. The gunman shot Ray twice, Angela 5 times.
The results of the post-mortem examinations were read out in their full and graphic detail. At the request, we were told, of the Fishers' daughter, Donna. She didn't want anything to be sanitised. She wants people to know what happened to her parents. She then went into the witness box to pay an emotional tribute to them and said the one comfort for her and her brother is that their parents left this world together.
A traumatic day for Donna, seen here leaving court. She had stayed to show support for another loved one giving evidence, the widower of Claire Windass. Jim's memory of the attack is still vivid. His voice broke as he said, "I dragged Claire off the sunbed. A bullet struck. Claire knew nothing about it. When the gunman had left, he said, I checked Claire. There was no pulse. I closed her eyes." Jim had to leave Tunisia without his wife. Her body was flown home later. A kind-hearted, beautiful person whose loss has left a huge void. As this inquest tries to find answers, it's clear the pain of the attack is still so raw. Tessa Chapman, 5 News.
A murder investigation is taking place after a 15-year-old boy was stabbed to death near a school in northwest London. The boy has been named locally as Kwamari Barnes. He was found with serious injuries in Willesden yesterday afternoon as pupils walked home. Another 15-year-old boy is being questioned by police. Drivers who commit the most serious speeding offences are facing harsher penalties. New guidelines will allow magistrates in England and Wales to give motorists a fine worth at least 1.5 times their weekly income. It'll come into effect in April. And EasyJet has warned that its profits will drop by more than £100 million, largely because of the collapse in the pound. It says even though passenger numbers improved at the end of the year, the pound's value means it's making less money. For more than 20 years, it's been an offence to attack an on-duty police officer in the UK. It's a law designed to give them vital extra protection. So should staff who work for the NHS be given the same support while dealing with the public? Let's have a look at what they face, because in the last year there were more than 70,000 assaults on NHS staff in England. That is 193 every single day. The majority were carried out by someone with a medical illness or a learning difficulty or someone who was heavily medicated. But even when the perpetrator deliberately attacks staff, knowing what they're doing, they're rarely punished. In fact, only 1 in 10 of those cases ever leads to a criminal punishment. And that is what a petition, now with more than 100,000 signatures, is trying to change. Peter Lane has been hearing from one paramedic who was attacked while doing his job.
My name's Karen Gardner, I'm a paramedic. Over the years, I've been assaulted by a number of patients. On the worst occasion, a patient tried to strangle me, he kicked me and he damaged my shoulder so badly I required an operation. Hi, Ailsa.
Karen's story in her own words. That assault left her with metal pins in her shoulder and, of course, psychological scars.
It is really difficult as a mum because, you know, I was going home to my 2 children and trying to cover bruises on my neck, and because I don't want them to be worried about me going to work. I didn't want them to be conscious that when mum goes to work then this could happen to her.
Was the guy prosecuted?
No, he wasn't.
Never happened?
No. If the law was to change that it's a criminal offence to assault a member of staff and people start to get prosecuted, then it can only make people think twice.
This footage shows other North East ambulance staff dealing with a violent patient and having to flee the vehicle. The number of such incidents is rising. The call now is for a specific offence of assaulting medical staff like the one which already exists in Scotland.
I think where somebody willfully assaults an NHS worker, I think there needs to be tougher criminal sanctions, and actually a specific law could send out a very strong deterrent message that actually it's unacceptable to assault an NHS worker. And, you know, we talk a lot about zero tolerance, but actually, you know, that's seen very much by nurses as rhetoric at the moment, so we need to have some substance behind that.
A petition started at LBC Radio to change the law now has more than 100,000 signatures, so Parliament must consider debating it. A recent Channel 5 documentary highlighted the violence some hospital staff face. The Department of Health says more evidence is needed to show that a new specific criminal offence outside existing law would make a difference to the NHS. Peter Lane, 5 News.
Coming up on 5 News. It's all smiles on day 2 for Donald Trump, but why not everyone is getting a warm handshake? Fighting fires Dubai style, why fire crews are being given jetpacks, and
why you didn't come home like you're supposed to? Huh?
British star Naomi Harris tells us about her Oscar nomination, diversity in Hollywood, and why women stars still get paid less than men. We'll see you after the break. Hello and welcome back. You're watching 5 News. Rolf Harris won't give evidence at his trial for sexual abuse. The 86-year-old, who was already in jail after being convicted of indecent assault in 2014, watched via video link as his barristers claimed the jury in that trial got it wrong. Olivia Kinsley is at Southwark Crown Court. Olivia, what did the jury hear today?
Well, Sean, the assaults Rolf Harris is accused of are alleged to have taken place between 1971 and 2004. His defence began their case today here by saying that he will not be giving evidence, in part because at 86 years old he may struggle to remember back that far. His barrister Stephen Vullo QC said, "I know some of the allegations go back 4 decades, but if the defendant can say no more to you than I cannot remember being there, the evidential importance of giving evidence is actually quite weak." Now, Rolf Harris has not been attending the trial here at Southwark Crown Court because at the start the judge took the unprecedented decision of allowing him to follow proceedings from Stafford Prison, where he's currently serving time for a series of separate indecent assaults of which he was convicted in 2014. Today, Rolf Harris's defence called into question those convictions, saying that the jury at that previous trial got it wrong. At this new trial today, he's accused of 8 counts of assault against women and girls. He denies all the charges. This trial will continue on Friday.
Olivia, thank you. Donald Trump has been pushing forward on his promises as president today, but if some of his voters hope that's building a wall on the border of Mexico or locking up Hillary Clinton, they'll have to keep waiting. Instead, he's meeting bosses from America's car industry, as Catherine Jones reports.
Day 2 at the office for President Trump, and it began with a breakfast meeting with motor industry executives.
We can start building in the United States first.
His key message, as it was throughout his campaign, he wants American jobs created.
We're bringing manufacturing back to the United States big league. We're reducing taxes very substantially, and we're reducing unnecessary regulations. And we want regulations, but we want real regulations that mean something.
Yesterday, the president pulled his country out of a huge trade agreement with Pacific Rim nations. And today, he signed more executive orders to clear the way for the construction of 2 controversial oil pipelines. So, some pledges fulfilled, but nowhere near the long list of immediate actions Donald Trump, the presidential candidate, promised.
On day 1, we will begin working on an impenetrable, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful southern border wall.
On day 1, I'm going to begin swiftly removing criminal, illegal immigrants from this country.
On my first day in office, I'm going to order a review of every single regulation and executive order issued by President Obama.
Last night, his press secretary explained why Mr. Trump's start has been slower than expected. It's part of the PR strategy.
It gives the issue the proper attention that they deserve, because part of it is that if we put them all out on one day, they get lost in the ether, I think. And I think he made these promises and pledges to the American people because they're important to him.
A new president can make some major changes quickly.
We will build our own pipeline. We will build our own pipes.
But it's not all this easy, as President Trump will learn in the weeks to come. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
Firefighters in Dubai have come up with an unusual and rather futuristic way of getting to the scene of fires more quickly. As this demonstration shows, jetpacks allow them to reach blazes along the city's waterways by boat, bypassing its notorious road traffic. It means they can also rise high above the fires, and it provides them with an unlimited source of water. Last year, scandal overshadowed celebration at the Oscars when, for the second year running, no black actor was up for a major award. Well, it appears that's been put right, with Hollywood praising the diversity of this year's lineup. British star Naomi Harris, who's in the running for Best Supporting Actress, has told us it's fantastic and not before time. Minnie Stevenson looks at the contenders for the big awards.
In La La Land, living the American dream is everything. The film an all-singing, all-dancing ode to Hollywood. So perhaps unsurprising that in real life La La Land today, the Academy nominated the film for 14 Oscars, more than any other musical in history.
It ain't about just one group on the silver screen.
And after outrage and protests in Los Angeles last year, when not a single black or ethnic minority star was nominated in any of the major acting categories, it appears the Academy have listened, with non-white actors being recognised across the board.
Why you didn't come home like you're supposed to?
British actress Naomi Harris is up for Best Supporting for her role in Moonlight. Speaking to 5 News today, Naomi told me she wants to see the day when diversity isn't even an issue.
I think it's fantastic that so many diverse performers and also filmmakers are being recognised this year. It's more than time that we move on from issues to do with race and gender.
So how is the actress feeling about being nominated for an Oscar for the first time ever?
I was with my mum, and I was watching like all the nominations come in, and it just got all a bit too much for me because of the anticipation, and so I actually switched the whole thing off, and I was trying to pretend it wasn't happening, and then my brother called me and said, "You've been nominated."
This is my favourite place in the whole world.
And there is no other woman on the planet who knows the Oscars red carpet better than Meryl Streep. Today, the actress Donald Trump, recently called overrated, broke all records by being nominated for the 20th time for her role in Florence Foster Jenkins. As for our British boys, Dev Patel has earned his first ever Oscar nomination for playing a young man separated from his family in India in the movie Lion.
How every day my real brother screams my name.
Success too for Andrew Garfield, nominated for Best Actor in the World War II film Hacksaw Ridge. The movie even earned its director, Mel Gibson, his first Oscar nomination since Braveheart over 20 years ago. But in terms of the big film of the night, critics say La La Land will clean up.
It has this incredible pizzazz about it. It has some of the biggest stars that are out there at the moment, and it almost has this directing prodigy in Damien Chazelle. So in terms of something that the Academy could completely lap up, La La Land is probably the film in which they'll enjoy the most.
Well, we'll have to wait until Oscars night on February the 26th to see whether Hollywood does indeed vote for Hollywood. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Now, before we go, Matt's joined us to tell us what's coming up on 5 News tonight. Hello.
Hi, Sian. Busy day. I've been speaking to the woman at the centre of that legal challenge to the government over its plans to carry out Brexit. Gina Miller has been subject to death threats since bringing the case, and she's been telling me whether her victory today was worth the abuse she suffered. That's in front of the 2 SAS bodyguards she has on hand now. Also, we'll be hearing from Alicia Dixon, who's campaigning for an end to animal cruelty in Thailand. She's just back from there, where she was moved to tears at the appalling conditions some of the animals she saw are kept in. Find out what can be done to help them at 6:30.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much, Matt. That is it for now. Claire Nazir has the weather for you next. I'll see you again tomorrow at 5. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.